Hey, g'day, and welcome to another episode of Tartarian Truthers with your hosts, Casey and JoJo. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we took a look into the energy of the old world, and now it's time for us to delve into the sounds of the old world. What do you mean by sounds, you ask? Well, for example, we want to know why so many of our old buildings, and not just our churches and cathedrals, but also our town halls and exhibition buildings, and even some post offices and universities, have or had majestic looking and otherworldly sounding organs and bells in them.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get the cathedrals as we've been conditioned to believe that all of them had organs that played during services to sing along to hymns, right? But why did all these other buildings need grand instruments too?
Well, to start with, let's go back in time and look at some of these instruments in a historical context, shall we?
So, music has been around forever, so it seems. I mean, we even have Damon, the teacher of Socrates and Pericles, recorded as saying way back in the 5th century BC that music is powerful because it imitates the movements of the soul. And back in those days, it is said that music was used as a moral and educational tool to calm the animal part of the soul when it was disturbed. Plato even wrote that harmony, which has motions akin to the revolutions of the soul within us, was given by the muses as an auxiliary to the inner revolution of the soul when it has lost its harmony, to assist in restoring it to order and concord with itself.
So, the hydraulis or water organ dates all the way back to ancient Greece, and there are many early accounts and depictions recorded of this instrument that used water in cisterns to stabilize wind pressure and a keyboard mechanism to allow wind into the pipes.
And do you know, Jojo, that we actually have a water pipe organ still working here in Australia?
Really?
Yeah, so it's down in Tassie. It's a little more advanced than the hydraulis used in ancient Greece, but it is said to date back to the pre 1860s, according to an article that we found on the ABC. And it is the only organ like this in Australia using hydraulic power.
And it's in Tasmania? Why does our smallest and most isolated state always have such interesting old stuff? It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. But let's go take a quick look now at this short clip about the water organ, or as it's also known, the Brindley organ.
Action, which works by a series of rods and levers. Exactly as it was built and as it was placed here in 1891 after it was moved from the old Masonics Institute in Cameron Street. It has its own quirks and characteristics, like an old motor car, but it's been very well looked after in recent times, and it's quite a delight to play.
Okay, wow. So we can also add Schmeishmation halls to our list of places that had these incredible instruments. Very interesting indeed. But but why? Why would the Schmeishmations want a grand old water organ in their temple?
Yeah, well, I think it's really got a lot to do with sound frequency, Jojo. So, this is a kind of technology used for healing. And way back in 1936, Dr. Royal Rife actually invented what was then known as the Rife microscope, from which he could view bacteria and damaged cells in real time using blood samples. He would then subject the blood samples to a series of light frequencies because he discovered that different frequencies of light will illuminate different aspects of diseases. He would then find the sound frequency that corresponded with the light frequency and bombard it with it, creating a feedback loop that then shattered the disease. This was such an incredible invention and was so well received that they even had a banquet to celebrate the end of all disease.
So what happened? Why do we still have disease today? And even more new diseases being discovered every year, right?
Yeah, so once again, a bit like old mate Tesla, Rife's discovery was eventually quashed and rejected in the 1940s by the American Medical Society, the American Cancer Society, and pretty much mainstream science as a whole. They claimed that Rife's microscopes had no scientific research to back them up, and Rife machines were not approved for treatment by health authorities all around the world. Poor old Rife died penniless and embittered by the failure of his devices to garner scientific acceptance at the ripe old age of 83. It's said that Rife blamed the scientific rejection of his claims on a conspiracy involving the American Medical Association, the Department of Public Health, and other elements of organized medicine, which had brainwashed and intimidated his colleagues, and was even quoted as saying, "There is no American Medical Association, there is an American drug syndicate. Those boys hate the word cure like the devil hates holy water."
Wow. So the big pharma monopoly already had their claws in deep way back then, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And today they're deeper than ever, but we won't go there in this episode.
Mm-mm.
So this info and Rife's findings, though, it got us thinking about sound frequencies and the healing of the human body, right?
Yeah. So we know that Pythagoras said this. Pythagoras established that the sound of the cosmos is capable of stimulating, curing, and reconfiguring the mind. In his school in Crotona, it is said he composed some pieces to cure certain physical and spiritual maladies, and he even used them to induce mental states linked to sleeping.
Okay, so that's really interesting. And it makes a lot of sense when you think of music as being a frequency. But what is even more interesting is this image of Pythagoras, Jojo. I mean, why in the world is he depicted in a painting from 1926 with all this shmishmation symbology around him?
Seriously, it is so odd, huh?
It is. And so we did a Google search and we discovered that this image comes from a book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And then Jojo says, "Oh, hang on, I have that book." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, go and get it right now." So Jojo obviously has the modern version of the book. So it's apparently been butchered. It doesn't have all of the original information in it from back in the day. And it doesn't have any of the intense color images by Augustus Knapp in them, which is what the Pythagoras image is. But what we did find out from this very interesting book is that Pythagoras was not only the first philosopher and was the one who actually coined the term philosopher, but he was literally like an original shmishmation.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah, so his students had to pass through a series of degrees and were never permitted personal contact with Pythagoras himself until they'd reached the higher grades. Once they'd passed the third degree of initiation, they were entitled to the secret wisdom. Silence, secrecy, and unconditional obedience were cardinal principles of this great order.
And this is in 590 BC, right?
Right. And Manly P. Hall goes on to say in this same book that Pythagoras' teachings are of the most transcendental importance to the Shmishmashans.
Right. So basically, if Pythagoras was teaching sound healing at his school back in the day, the Shmishmations know about it, right? Hence why they had a huge ass old hydraulic organ in their building in Tassie. I wonder how many other lodges, temples, and other Shmishmation affiliated buildings have or had organs, and even other musical instruments used for healing the body with sound.
Yeah, who knows? But I'm sure there are quite a few out there. So I guess this is where we kind of discuss what is sound healing. You know what I mean? Like, is it legit, Jojo? As in, is it actually accepted by mainstream science nowadays?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still like, new age hoo-ha?
Yeah, Casey. So this is absolutely legit. And back in 2002, Professor James Jimzewski of UCLA, along with his colleague Dr. Andrew Pelling, found that cells made sounds which lie in the range of human hearing. The sounds relate to the health or disease of the cell. Using Raman spectroscopy, a laser light reflects from the tissue sample, carrying many small fluctuations from thousands of cells that are detected electronically and simultaneously made audible by a computer. Listening to these makes it possible to detect cancerous cells, creating an oral diagnostic tool.
Okay, all right. So that's almost like the Rife microscope, but in reverse, kind of.
Yeah, I think so, kind of. Definitely the same scope. Now, to very briefly describe the principles of sound and music healing, so it is at its core based on resonance. A weak or unhealthy vibration can be modified through resonance to be more intense and harmonious. Then, repetition is used as it causes the mind to relax, creating dopamine, therefore lulling the brain into a state of relaxation. Contrast in the music is used to build tension and release. And lastly, silence or nothingness is used to allow the body to assimilate the vibrations.
Wow. So if this has been known for a very long time, it kind of makes sense as to why so many of our old world buildings have huge and majestic instruments in them. And like we discussed in our cathedrals and churches episode, these sound frequencies could have been used to heal people en masse, right? I mean,
Mm.
those organs and bells are so loud. And if people were gathering around in the local vicinity each week, were they actually being healed of the bacteria and disease that may have accumulated in their bodies? Almost like they were getting a tune up, so to speak, making sure all their cells were vibrating at the correct frequency. And it would make you feel good too, right? Like happy and relaxed, totally stress free.
Yeah, I think so. And this is why I love this quote from Brady Carson, who we both follow on Instagram. He has some great content, and thinking about churches and cathedral bells from this perspective really gets you thinking.
The real conspiracy is that poor and exiled religious settlers in a harsh new world, using only hand tools and horse and buggy, created incredible and impossible structures with piezoelectric resonant towers made from brick and stone with ornate and superfluous details, just so countless different church denominations could ring 7,000-pound bells with specific resonant frequencies to tell people what time it was on cloudy days. I'm sorry, but I'm not the crazy conspiracy theorist. You are. His story is a lie.
I love it. It is so true, right? These ginormous bells are made just to tell people what time it was. Sure. I mean, can you imagine the time and energy, let alone money, that it would take to make these? And then, of course, somebody at some point in time had to go and figure out the exact frequency of each bell. And bells can be traced right back to China in 2000 BC, if we're going by the mainstream narrative.
Yeah, that's way back before Jesus even appeared on the scene. And bells were viewed as musical instruments of the gods, items that carried the will of the gods across the land, provided peace, clear minds, exiled bad spirits, and provided happiness. So they were pretty popular, huh? And then going back to our grand organs too, they are so huge and need to be played so precisely to make their beautiful sounds. And if people aren't experienced in playing them, they can make them sound like absolute rubbish, right? I mean,
Mm.
the meticulousness that has gone into the construction of these old world instruments is nothing short of astounding. So, do you think, Jojo, that that may have been why during World War One, so many of the bells were removed and destroyed?
Yes. So, this is a theory that is often discussed in our community, and this short video from Truth Warrior 111 on TikTok explains it perfectly. Listen to this.
Of bells taken for more than their metal, so let's talk about it. These bells were buried, destroyed, and replaced. The original bells emit a certain vibrational frequency. and you can clearly see some look to be discovered after being hidden for years in the ground. I find it very peculiar why all these bells all over the place unmounted and cast to the ground. And we're given all these different narratives that don't add up, like one being in 1942 the Germans are collecting the bells, saying they were melted and used for the war. Many of us hypothesize these wars were an excuse to destroy the Tartarian buildings, culture, and technology. Everybody knows that sound can heal and activate the higher human abilities. And those of you who are using, for example, tuning forks and other sound healing instruments know the power of coherent sound to dispel heavy energy, to transmute darkness into light. The Tartarians knew the importance of acoustic resonance. They knew it had an important effect on the human beings. It's quite possible they used some of the bells to reset the harmonics in the limestone buildings and temples as part of the anointment process. These satanic parasites that control our realm right as we speak are the same families that destroyed our technology. They did it to delay our destiny.
She nails it. Huh? Bloody parasites everywhere.
But yeah, so whilst researching organs in Australia, it appears that something similar, but on less of a scale, also happened to our organs here in Australia. So this is from the Organ Historical Trust of Australia website.
Later in the present century, this wonderful heritage has been substantially eroded through destruction and insensitive rebuilding. None of the 4 major Melbourne 19th century concert organs survive. In the 1950s and 1960s, the introduction of electric actions and tonal modifications, often in an alien style, resulted in the irretrievable alteration of numerous historic instruments, thus losing their tonal integrity and jeopardizing their mechanical longevity.
Okay, so they either destroyed or ruined the organs, replaced the bells, which in turn stopped people from receiving the benefits of acoustics and frequency, which we can pretty much say emanated from these buildings that were more likely to have been incredible resonance machines.
Especially when we know that the human body is made up of 60% water. And it's a known fact that sound and frequencies have a profound effect on water. Imagine the effect that these sounds and frequencies would have on humans.
Yeah, so what if this could also be used against us, Casey? I mean, if some frequencies can have a positive effect on human health and well-being, there could be frequencies that affect us in a negative way, right?
100% JoJo, and that is what we're going to deep dive into next week in part 2 of Sounds of the Old World.
So interesting. I can't wait. And to end this episode, we're going to leave you with a short clip of some of Australia's beautiful old world organs.
Enjoy.